Sup, guys?
Word.
Sup, listeners? Welcome to the GameFront podcast. I'm joined with Ron Whitaker, the senior editor, Ross Lincoln, the features editor, Phil Hornshaw, the deputy editor, and Phil Owen, associate editor and special guest extraordinaire. And I'm Mark Burnham, the editor-in-chief. Until tomorrow. Tomorrow will be my last day at GameFront. I'm moving on after 4 awesome years. It's been awesome running the site. And I'm leaving it in very capable hands, in Ron Whitaker's hands. His big paws.
Big southern hands.
So, topics for today, we're going to talk about a few things. We'll kick things off and talk about the PS4, which a few of us have been playing for a few days. We'll talk about Killzone Shadowfall, which Mr. Owen reviewed and gave a very glowing review to. EA has recently sort of about-faced in terms of their used games policy, and I know Ross Lincoln has some thoughts about that. Phil Hornshaw and Ron have been playing XCOM Enemy Within, and they'll talk a little bit about that. And then last but not least, we'll talk speculation about Fallout 4, which there's all kinds of crazy, like, whiteboard theories going on all over the all over the internet. So, but let's kick it off and talk about the PS4. I have one. I've been playing it. Phil Hornshaw is working on a console review for the PS4. Just a couple thoughts initially. I think all the non-gaming stuff about the PS4 is actually quite a lot better than the PS3. Like, using Netflix is awesome. I love the new Netflix. It's like bigger and it loads a heck of a lot faster. And sort of switching between apps is a lot more intuitive. You can just sort of hit the home button and get out of there and go switch to something else, and pausing your game and all that stuff is really good. My controller, the L1 button is sticking, and that I might take the whole console back. Because no, not really, but that's been definitely a drag. Especially in Resogun, where you have to use that button all the time to do your boost.
Oh, yeah.
So that's been a pain in the ass. Resogun's awesome, and then I've also been playing Killzone, which is not very awesome to me. And I'll talk about that later.
Did you spill Mountain Dew on your controller? Is that the issue?
I started Googling it angrily, like, this must be a widespread problem. like looking for other people. And there are other people, probably millions of consoles have been sold. Wow, there are a couple other controllers out there that don't work. But people have been saying, like, you should try washing your hands. Come on, man. Like,
Mark,
I've owned so many consoles and so many controllers over the years. You'd have
I've never once washed my hands.
Yeah, you'd have to be like coming straight from your job as a chimney sweep to like pick up a controller. Yeah. For that to be it. No, but anyways, like, I like the PS4. I'm enjoying it, but it doesn't really have a lot of games for it yet. It's a joy to use with the apps and the speed of sort of whipping around the menus and stuff. And I don't really like Killzone, so I don't know what that all says, but
I think everyone knows that Mark's L1 button is sticking because it's coated in a gluey mess of Mountain Dew and Doritos.
Yeah, I'm liking it pretty well as well. I've basically my PS4 is now my go-to entertainment system app or console because I pulled the PS3 out of the way.
Yep.
And yeah, it's remarkable how much better it works than the PS3, even though, I mean, of course it does, because how many years has it been? But at the same time, just the network speed is way faster. The ability to switch in between apps. I routinely will, like, flip to Resogun in the middle of a Netflix movie.
Yep.
When my wife is out of the room for a few minutes or on the phone or something. Play Resogun for a few minutes, flip back to the movie. That's cool. I really appreciate that kind of stuff. And it's just, the interface is so much better. It's so much better.
It's
just,
there's a little bit of how did we ever live with it before
so much
syndrome, right? Like,
yeah.
Well, and it makes you wonder how they came up with the just completely heinous PS Vita interface, which was actually like way worse than the PS3's interface.
And worse than it was even worse than the PSP's interface.
Yeah, and like, and yeah, so I guess they did learn something, you know. They
Yeah.
they took such a big step back with the Vita, and now you have this other thing that's just so much more efficient, I guess.
Yes. It's definitely like it's a much better design. Like applause for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not to say that the Vita is not really a cool piece of hardware, because I love mine, and I'm looking forward to laying hands on a PS4, which has been like gold around here where I live. So,
Oh, yeah.
if I can ever get my hands on one, I'm really looking forward to trying out the Vita functionality with it, because I love that little sucker, and anything that makes it better makes me happy.
Yeah, PS4s are going for about $600 on eBay, it seems. I was scanning it the other day.
I don't even understand that. It's not like it's
Supply and demand, baby.
Yeah, but it's not like it's been discontinued, and there aren't even that many games where there's not a single game for it right now that's like the must-play game of the year. It's like you're not missing out if you wait a week longer to get it at the normal retail price.
I wonder if you guys remember when the PS2 came out and
Oh, yeah.
the nutcase eBay scenario that was going on.
Yeah.
Well, because they in that case they only fulfilled half of the pre-orders because they had a stock shortage. So they had 1 million pre-orders and only had 500,000 consoles. So yeah, it was just completely.
I'll tell you how old I am. I stood in line at Funko Land with a bag full of PS1 console and accessories and games that I traded in on my launch night PS2.
Oh,
Nice.
dude.
I did the smart thing and I waited about a year to get a PS2. I finally broke down after Grand Theft Auto 3.
I wonder if the people paying $600 for PS4 on eBay are the same people that paid $600 at Best Buy for PS3 at launch.
Well, not exactly the same people. Best Buy have it now, dude.
Yeah. The thing that's funny too about the PS4 like upsell price is that it could have all been avoided for those people. Like, I didn't do anything special. I went down to my Walmart and I put down $100 and that was it. And they locked it in. And then I went and picked it up for the regular price. But if you didn't think ahead, like these are those people that didn't think ahead and now they're paying $600 for it.
Ask Cornshaw how he got his.
Yeah, well, to be fair, I wandered into a GameStop on Thursday night at 9:30. The one in Hollywood, mind you, which I thought was going to be blown out. 9:30, I go up and I'm like, hey, is there any reason for me to stand in line if I don't have a pre-order? He's like, you can make a pre-order right now. So I put my money down at 9:30. Ross, Owen, and I went back to my place, had a couple drinks, came back at 11:30, picked it up. No problem.
I think
it was amazing.
I don't know, but I suspect that might be a rare story.
I think so too, but it was still awesome.
Yeah, and I think in a bigger city like LA where we are, they're more likely to have, or they were more likely to have, extras than like in good old Kentucky where
Ron's is. The trading post that Ron has to go to.
That's correct. They can actually only ship in like 3 PS4s at a time because otherwise the horse breaks down.
No, it actually comes in on the Wells Fargo wagon, doesn't it?
No, the wagon broke down years ago.
Yeah. So suck it, everyone who doesn't live in LA. Yeah.
For the positives that we've been talking about with PS4, and it is a cool little machine, I bought it for work. Like, the reason that I bought it was because we're talking about it now. If that was not the case, I don't think I would have gone and done that. There's really nothing to play on it. It feels like I've been playing Knack and Killzone. I'm not crazy about either one. Resogun's fun, but it's still it's a pretty compact experience, There's not really a whole hell of a lot to do with the thing. And a lot of the features are not all the way up to snuff either. Like, streaming seems like it's still got a ways to go before it's going to be really good. Owen and I had weird problems with party chat yesterday for no reason, stuff like that. It still needs, I think, a little time in the oven.
Right. James Heaney was saying that even when he just records footage, half the time it won't show up.
Yeah, I've had that issue
in
too.
his feed.
Just doesn't happen, and same with screenshots. And if you want to share any of that stuff, you have to do it through social media. You can't. There's not like another means of dealing with those photos and videos.
So no editing or anything. no editing
Also,
unless you download it from social media. Then
Right, exactly.
Also, it's super irritating that you take a screen. I took a screen of a funny Killzone glitch. It looked like a dude was doing a permanent one-handed push-up, but he was dead hovering in the air. So I snapped a photo. It would be nice if you could just upload that right there, like from the game. But no, you have to like back out, go into your screenshots, find it in there, and then you can only upload it to social media. It's kind of.
Also, am I an idiot, or can you not delete those yet?
I haven't tried.
I feel like there's no delete function for any of the stuff you accidentally save. Because, I mean, you hit the share button by accident when you're trying to figure out how the console works, like I did 900 times, and you end up with 900 screenshots of the menu. And I can't seem to get rid of those. So.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, it's all real beta feeling, a lot of it. A lot of the newfangled cool stuff that they put, the capture stuff.
I mean, I remember that the launches of the PS3 and 360 were a lot like that, too. I think every launch is a lot like that.
From what I've heard, Xbox One is a lot like that, too.
Yeah. Stuff everything basically works, but there's a lot of tweaking that can be done, a lot of polishing that can still be done, and, there's no games. There's never been any games at launch of a console.
So what games are there? We should say, Killzone, Resogun. Resogun and Contrast, you could both get for free, if you would like. They're free with a PlayStation Plus membership. And then you can download Warframe for free. And then, of course, there's all the other third-party things that you can play on PlayStation 4. So if you're not just looking for exclusives, you can play Ghosts or Battlefield or AC4, which I may get for my
Blacklight's on there, too, isn't it?
Well, Need for Speed is the best game on PS4, I think. And, of course, it's also on PC and current gen or last gen or whatever and Xbox One. But it's if you don't have a good PC and you want to see all those leaves blowing everywhere in high in 1080p, then PS4 is the way to go.
Sure. Let me ask you guys a question really fast. I'd take a little bit of issue with what Ron just said because until quite recently, the norm was there weren't like this huge array of games at launch, but there would always be like one or two like, ta-da, here's the game for our console. I mean, Super Nintendo launched with Super Mario World, and Nintendo 64 launched with Mario 64. I mean, obviously Nintendo has its mascots, but is there anything available right now that you feel like is like really worth it? Like really is just like, I'm really glad I'm playing this and definitely glad I bought it. I mean, it sounds like the answer to that is no at all, right?
So I'd say I am glad I bought it, but for reasons that are different now than I would have applied to one of those older consoles you mentioned. Like, it's the whole package now. Like, I'm happy that I'm playing Resogun. I'm sort of sometimes off and on happy that I'm playing Killzone. And then other than that, I just have this kick-ass media center in there that's way better than the PlayStation 3 that makes it easier to watch TV. By the way, it has more than Netflix in there, too. It's got tons of stuff that I didn't even really know as brands necessarily, like Crunchyroll. Am I making that up?
It's anime, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all anime, and they've got you can do your Amazon Prime stuff in there. You could do that with PS3 too, but they've got that in there. There's tons of good stuff to do in there that's not gaming.
I'm looking at some of the launch lineups from old consoles, and outside of the occasional, Nintendo stuck a Mario game in there, there's really not any. I mean, the original PlayStation's big launch title was like Ridge Racer.
Yeah.
Ridge Racer.
I mean, what was the big PS3 launch?
Resistance.
Resistance.
Yeah, Resistance Fall of Man.
Yeah.
Which sucked, and it was ugly. And it was only like with the sequels that it actually became like a popular, cool thing.
Think about this, guys. Think about the games that are on PS4 right now. Here's the list of the games that launched in the US on PlayStation 3. Call of Duty 3, Genji, Days of the Blade, Madden, Marvel Ultimate Alliance, Mobile Suit Gundam, Need for Speed, NBA 07, NPA 2K7, NHL 2K7, Resistance, Ridge Racer, Tiger Woods Golf, Tony Hawk Project 8, and Untold Legends Dark Kingdom. Now, do you hear anything in there that you're like, God, I miss playing that game?
No. Go on.
That's it. That's the whole list.
Oh, yeah.
It seems par for the course I'm not. I don't think any of us are surprised by it. And if you have a PS4 now, you likely are either in the media, like how Phil was saying, this is your job, or you're an early adopter and you understand what you're getting into. That's kind of, I'm straddling that too. I tend to be that way. So I enjoy this kind of thing. I think the whole spectacle of a new console launch is fun. I like that it's a new media center. So I think if you're one of those people, like you will enjoy it, and I am enjoying it.
Yeah, I mean
it's not like this is it.
Right.
This is the console. In 6 months, we're going to have a ton of stuff to play.
Yeah, the only point is that if you don't really have the money, or if you don't want to go through the hassle, you're not missing out necessarily, not running out and getting one this weekend. Yeah. Although, I'll tell you what, when Tiny Brains comes out, that might change my opinion there. I'm excited for that game. It's going to be the good one for the holiday.
I think the thing to keep in mind is that, it's going to be a few months, like Phil said, before not only gamers, but developers really start to focus in on next-gen consoles.
Oh, yeah.
There's still going to be, Watch Dogs comes out in the spring, it's going to be available on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. Now, the games that come out this time...
Is it, though?
Yeah.
Watch Dogs?
Yeah.
Oh, they're doing old gen?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the games that come out this time next year, that's probably not going to be true. And so, you've got probably 6 months, I think, before you really get into a position where you have to look at it and go, okay, if I want to be a console gamer and I want to play the new games, it's time.
Yeah. For sure. Cool. So let's transition to the next segment. We're going to go away for a second and come back, and when we do, we're going to talk about Killzone. Welcome back to the GameFront podcast. So we're going to talk specifically about Killzone Shadowfall, which is arguably the flagship launch game for PS4, except it's really Resogun. But Phil Owen reviewed it for GameFront this week, and he gave it a 91 out of 100. So, Mr. Owen, why don't you kick us off and talk about what you really like about it?
All right. Well, the thing about Shadowfall is that it sort of brings to the forefront what had kind of been subtext through the PS3 Killzones and the PS2 Killzone, in that the ISA and the Vectins who you are, you've always been one of them. They aren't really the good guys in the normal sense. Like, people like to look at the Helghast as, space Nazis or whatever, and that's not even really a good representation of what they are, because they're more like the USSR, and sort of responding to the capitalist aggression of the
Their logo does look a lot like a swastika.
Oh yeah,
right.
They're certainly supposed to feel like space Nazis, but the story of
from
them,
a visual standpoint, yes. But yeah, there's a lot of Killzone has like a weirdly huge amount of lore for like being a shooter franchise like this that doesn't have like a ton of novel tie-ins like Halo or something. You can actually track the complete history of the Killzone saga from like today to then, 350 years from now, and that's really interesting, and and the whole thing is very, morally and ethically relative.
Mm-hmm.
Like, basically, this system that they're in was a sort of a jumping off point to further human colonies out in space, and the Helghan people, bought the system from Earth, who was strapped for cash, and then they started taxing everybody, and Earth didn't like that, and so they came in and bombed them and basically exiled them to Helghan, where they lived for 150 years or 200 years or something, and then sort of evolved into this subspecies, and then and they've been living in this in this rock, this inhospitable, horrible place that kills you. The atmosphere is toxic.
Mm-hmm.
Like their life expectancy was like 30 or 40 years, through that whole time, and of course they invaded Vecta. I mean, like,
yeah.
It's like that. It makes perfect sense that the whole Killzone trilogy happened because, you can't just, as I wrote in the review, the Vectans, tried to grind them into the dirt and, and they just fought back. That's basically all that was. And, anyway, so now, but at the end of Killzone 3, you basically committed genocide against the Helghast by dropping a petricized bomb on Helghan and killing like billions of them. And in Shadowfall, at the beginning of the game, the Vectans decide that what Helghasts are left get to have their own little ghetto on Vecta, and they and of course, they that doesn't go so well.
Yeah. This is one of the things I'm unsure about in the game so far. I'm about in chapter 6 or 7, so I haven't completed it yet. But it's, on one hand, it's sort of like compelling. I hate that word. It's neat. It's neat that you're not sure who the good guy is and who the bad guy is, and it's nice to see this story take a shape that way. On the other hand, it sort of feels like both groups are assholes.
Well, yeah, they are.
And
they are.
Well, at that point, it sort of becomes like, well, what am I fighting for? That's kind of like one of the feelings I've been having as I've been playing the game. It's like, I don't really like who you are, Lucas, the Shadow Marshal. I don't really like the Helghast. I don't really like Sinclair. I don't really care. Like, I don't know who I'm supposed to root for.
Well, you're rooting for, the whole point is, you're rooting for the people in Container City. Have you been there yet?
I have, and I will say that, I'll get to this in a sec, but the game gets a hell of a lot better when you get to Container City.
Yeah, like, that's just horrible. You go into Container City and it's just full of these everybody's just crammed into these, literally, containers, and it's just a giant stackable slum, and,
so I wasn't supposed to elbow smack those people in the face as I was walking by.
Right. But yeah, I mean, you're at it gets so bad, they're basically just trying to wipe each side is trying to wipe the other out, basically, through like these weapons of mass destruction. And basically you're there to keep that from happening, and that's really, this is sort of the logical progression of the overall Killzone story, I think.
I get that. I guess I find myself more wanting like the Borg to come into orbit and just wipe everyone out. But I hate both of these people. It's just this endless bloody war. I don't even know, like in Mass Effect, right? Like, you get a sense for like the culture and like the music and the nightlife and what people are trying to save, basically. And
right.
I haven't necessarily gotten that rich world sense from Killzone that's making it like worth it. That's just
right. Well, and I think that's it may be on purpose. I also discussed this in the review about, it kind of feels like, they're purposely being obscure about some of the details to sort of give you that feeling of, like after 9/11 and when we're getting ready to go to war and everybody's, behind that because we see what we see and we're told what we're told. And then later on, years later, we learn that maybe things weren't so clear cut, the way that, we're like, oh, well, maybe we shouldn't have been so eager to
Sure.
go fight.
I will say that's nice that the story is not spoon fed to you necessarily. Like, it may be too, like, I'm coming in late to the series, but I didn't feel like babied in terms of how I was getting information about the larger world and conflict. I was sort of like constantly confused at first, honestly.
Right.
Actually kind of starts to make more and more sense.
Right, yeah, there's a lot of sort of contextual storytelling, and I don't mean like necessarily in the same way as like BioShock does it with audio logs. There are audio logs for sure, but I think you can sort of get the flavor of it without them. But yeah, it's definitely not, they definitely don't hold your hand. I think maybe they should a little bit more, because there are reasons that we have storytelling conventions, that dictate how you sort of explain what's going on. And I think perhaps Guerrilla sort of skips a few too many of those.
Sure.
But I think I get the point because I have all of the context of Killzone, but I think new players and even people who are just familiar with the PS3 games maybe might be losing something here. Who
Sure.
don't appreciate the full context of why the Hellghast are what they are and why they're so aggressive.
So, in terms of gameplay, like, I think it does some things right. You mentioned in your review that it's a lot like Crysis, which I certainly agree with. It's a really nicely detailed sci-fi world. It's very shiny, and you have gadgets, and you're sort of more stealthy than you are run and gun. You're supposed to like sneak around and use your little bot and stuff. I almost started to feel like it's maybe even a little too much like Crysis. Like, I was waiting for him to be like cloak engaged. Like, that's the one thing you can't do that is Crysis, is turn invisible or like use armor. And in fact, I'm like missing those because I don't know how I'm supposed to flank 9 dudes in a tower with just like my bot. Like, it's almost like frustrating in that sense where it doesn't go full Crysis. It goes just barely almost.
Right. Well, it takes like the very basic concept of Crysis and puts a completely different skin on it. It's like Crysis if you didn't have the suit but had all these other various tools instead.
Sure.
And there's actually you may not have gotten to this, but actually they sort of changed the dynamic of it later on, where when you team up with another human person instead of your bot, and it kind of changes, and that human is in sort of an Overwatch role, and it you can do some different things there that are.
I think I've
useful.
just gotten there.
Yeah.
Where you're like, you control a miner bot.
Yeah.
You
can control. Yeah, you can take over. Like these little bots, or and you also have your friend Echo, hanging out with her sniper rifle, and that's fundamentally it's the same sort of thing, but it's different abilities, which are interesting.
Yeah. Would you agree that the first half of the game is a little dry?
Yeah. I mean, that's not unusual, just given the sort of spare way that shooter games tell stories, I think. That's how I felt about Tomb Raider. Like, they just kind of toss you in there, and here you go. And you don't really have a lot of context there. And here, it's, even with context, they don't, it's sort of, you kind of jump in head first. And that's sort of it's not something I like, but it's something that I accept in a lot of ways. And also, although I actually last Thursday I watched Hornshaw play it for a little while, and then I got my PS4 the next morning, and then I started over, and that probably helped me a bit just to have that sort of repeat. Like, I think he played the first 2 missions, or the prologue and the first mission, and then I watched him do that, and then I played those 2, and that, I think that helped me sort of soak in what was actually going on, especially in the prologue, I think.
Yeah. I'm glad that it's getting better now. Like, after you get to Containment City, and the story kind of seems like it kicks into high gear, and things are happening, and the gameplay is changing, and the scenery is changing. But I'm still mad that the first half seemed like a snooze. I don't know. Like, what did you think, Hornshaw?
I'm not too deep into it yet, but yeah, I mean, I feel like it takes getting used to, for sure. It plays like Crysis without telling you it's going to play like Crysis. So, you get into that first mission, it's just like, okay, here's a big freaking forest, like, wander through it. And I had trouble with that first mission, especially Thursday at 2 a.m. I started it again last night and liked it a little more. But, primarily what I've done so far in Killzone is multiplayer, which I have enjoyed quite a bit. So, I don't know. I can't really weigh in on the campaign side of things just yet.
I haven't touched multiplayer. What's it like?
Class-based. I feel like it's pretty similar to other Killzones, although it's been a long time since I played them.
Yeah, it's definitely very similar to the previous game. It's the same mode. So
right.
the Warzone idea, it's the same. It's just there are fewer classes, and there were 5 classes in Killzone 3, and they sort of consolidated those things.
Yeah, but it does the class based well, and there's a lot of cool variations to loadout. So like I've been playing as a medic. The medic guys who are the support class, they also get to carry around turrets or the ability to call like an air drone or set new spawn points, stuff like that. I've had a lot of fun with that so far. Like I've run around battles, saving people, throwing down turrets, stuff like that.
Nice.
It's pretty cool.
Nice.
And I think what really makes it work is that it handles so much better than the previous games. Like Killzone 2 was cool, but it was so sluggish. It was like the most sluggish game I'd played since like Black on the Xbox.
Yeah.
And Killzone 3 was an improvement because they toned down the visuals a little bit, I feel like. But even then it still wasn't Call of Duty, I guess, in terms of responsiveness. And this Shadowfall is basically, it just feels right in the way it moves, and the way, it feels to, look behind you, I guess, when you swing around or whatever, it feels right this time. And I think that sort of, that pulls it all together. I think it just handles right. It handles efficiently.
It does play very, very nicely, I have to say. It does. It's pretty smooth. It does have a couple problems that other shooters have. Like, I found myself going like, why can't I jump over this 2-foot tall barrier right here, and I can jump over this 8-foot tall one? Like, it has weird level crap that lots of shooters have. Like, oh, I guess this is an invisible wall. Okay.
Yeah, I found myself dropping 2 feet down between some buildings yesterday, and it killed me because you're not supposed to go there.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know that.
And then the other thing that maybe it copied from Crysis and it shouldn't have is I think the AI has the weird power where as soon as you're in a spot that's potentially in eyesight of an enemy, they all see you and start shooting you.
Oh, especially when the alarm's going off, which is just super irritating anyway.
Yeah.
There's just like streams of dudes until you hack an alarm and turn it off, and they all know where you are, and they all run straight at you.
Yeah.
It's like, ugh.
And they all have some seriously great aim.
Oh, yeah.
The thing I remember most from multiplayer in Killzone 3, like, it was fun. Like you guys are saying, it felt good. But the thing I remember most is that in the pre-release beta, when they were letting the media play multiplayer, I got absolutely mercilessly murdered by Jim Sterling for like hours on end. That man had my number for like an entire week.
Nice. So yeah, that's Killzone. I think we can move on to the next topic. We're going to talk about EA. Oh, unless you had more to add, Mr. Owen.
No, I mean, it's just a smooth experience, and I'm a sucker for, moral ambiguity. So,
Totally. I'm going to play it through to the end, and I'm hoping that it keeps this pace that it gets right in about Chapter 6 through the end, and then I'll go into multiplayer and keep enjoying it. But yeah, that first half, man. There's the critique that is kind of common where people say something is shooter the game, and I felt like that really applied to the first half of Shadowfall, personally. Anyway, all right, when we come back, we'll talk about EA and their used games policy. Mr. Lincoln,
Yes, sir.
what's going on with electronics?
So we're back then.
Yeah, we are.
All right. So earlier this week, our good friend Blake Jorgensen from EA, he's the CFO, was talking during the UBS Global Technology Conference in Sausalito, California, and he said, among other things, quote, "I also think that used games are an important part of the industry. People think about the price of games based on the fact that they can still return that game, and they need a physical disc to do that," he said. And so we'll probably keep the physical business around for some period of time. Now, he was talking mostly about the fact that, contrary to all the rawing, and you guys know how much of a axe to grind I have about this issue. But, he was talking more about the fact that contrary to all the raw, no, we're not going to enter the all-digital future anytime soon. He was basically admitting that. But in the service of saying this, he also seemed to signal a sea change in EA, where, we all know that EA has been rather hostile and have tried lots and lots of zany schemes to undermine the used games industry.
Well, and they invented the online pass.
Yeah.
Yep. That's the first zany scheme I'm thinking of, in fact. So this represents a kind of, it's not like the ambiguity of how he phrases it, combined with the fact that he was largely talking about admitting that our digital infrastructure and, left unsaid, consumer interest just isn't there for us to go all digital yet. But at the same time, this does represent a pretty big shift. Even if it's not like officially the company giving a press release, this seems to be a pretty official way of EA stealth going back on what they've been doing in the past. And of course, they already got rid of their online passes earlier this year anyway. Go ahead.
I was going to say, there's the rest of that where he goes on in that talk.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about how they spend a lot of time looking at the record business. And, he says, even though we figured out that nobody in the room had bought a CD anytime in recent past, there's still a ton of CDs that get sold.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think what you're seeing is a sea change in EA, because he goes on to say, quote, so you might still buy a physical disc, but what you can do is extend the gameplay 10 or 12 months based on digital extensions.
Oh, sure,
where
yeah.
it all comes down via downloads coming in smaller pieces, right?
Yeah,
so,
the big thing here is that we have to wonder, does EA plan to start releasing Mass Effect 3 incomplete games as a sort of like policy from this point forward? Like they're still going to release the physical copy of, Madden Battlefield 5, and then to get the ending or whatever, you're going to have to keep purchasing DLC? Or is this just a commitment to making the purchase of the game worth it because they're going to continue supporting it with DLC?
I think it's a commitment to having $60 games and then having 10 months worth of for purchase DLC.
Oh, absolutely. But the distinction here is I'm going to use Borderlands 2 as sort of my golden mean of how a company should approach DLC.
Well, you can forget it because EA can never make that type of.
Oh, sure. I'm never expecting EA to create a game as good as Borderlands 2, but Borderlands 2, the game itself is complete when you buy it on disc. You don't need the DLC to get the full experience, but they've gone all out making the DLC worth your time. And ultimately, obviously, they got around to releasing a copy of the disc with all the DLC on it. So is EA going to do more stuff like that, or are we going to see crap like the From Ashes DLC? Or what was that game a couple of years ago? I think it was a Capcom game where they actually released a game without the ending.
Azura's Wrath.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Go ahead.
I feel like you're going to see more of what we've seen from EA already.
Yeah.
Mass Effect 2, where if you want to get, come on, Phil, Ross, somebody tell me what the two crew members were that were DLC.
Well, they were free DLC, by the way.
No. Only one.
No, they weren't.
Nakasumi.
You're right.
Kasumi was $7.
You're right.
Yeah.
But those characters aren't essential.
They're not essential, but I seem to recall somebody in this room saying that they were, there was a lot of story there that sort of needed to be.
No, we were talking about Javik from Mass Effect 3.
That's
Javik is absolutely critical to understanding the story of Mass Effect 3, and it's DS of the highest degree that they, are lying. I'm sorry, but they are lying every time they say, no, we didn't have this finished and it was completed separately. Bull. I actually have the Art of Mass Effect 3 that came out 6 months earlier that has Javik in it, and I'm sorry to go off on a tangent. We're talking about these games. Still have PTSD. Anyway.
Plus the final hours of Mass Effect 3 app says that they were working on it years ago. So,
I think that's what you're going to see from EA. You're going to see DLC that, while maybe not completely and totally required to finish games, it's going to be stuff that you're going to want, stuff that people almost need.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't think that's unique to EA though. I think
absolutely not.
I think this is a trend within the industry.
Right. My bigger question is EA going to do it in a way where you kind of just implied, where it's something that you're getting value for your money. You don't have to buy it, but it does just give you more of what you already like? Or is EA going to do shadier stuff that diminishes the value of the product you paid $60 for? And obviously, I feel like part of this statement, which has just slipped into this larger thing, I mean, I don't believe for a second that anything was just sort of randomly set upon. These guys are very practiced whenever they go out and give speeches like this. So I have no doubt that there was a lot of thought amongst the board of the company and anyone who was advising them of what he was going to say. I can't help but feel like this is part of, because, you know, EA's already said, we don't want to be thought of as the worst company in America anymore, you know?
Yeah.
They're clearly... go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, they're clearly aware that nobody likes them, and I wouldn't be surprised if if there are problems perhaps with, like, internal brands with terrible ID too. I mean, BioWare's probably suffering. BioWare's reputation is probably mud, and they know it, even though they're not admitting it. But go ahead and say what you're going to say.
No, I'm just, I'm going to make that exact same point, is that I have a feeling that it's a little early to read too much into this.
Yeah.
Because if anything happened to EA in the last 2 years, it's that they just got pummeled in the minds of the public. Like, that happened all the time, over and over again, repeatedly, painfully. And I think that EA is, one, aware of that, which is great, good for them, because they need to do something about it. And two, I think they're also starting to recognize that in the all-digital future, the way to make money is with longer tail on games. I mean, like, we've known that for a long time, but they're starting to recognize, I think, that there's more to be gained from the reputation and also from just the money in hand by getting people to want to buy your game, regardless of how they get it.
Yeah.
You know, they're going to do better. And I think they're just catching up with where everybody else is. And you can't look around the industry right now without seeing these, like, golden, great stories of people like GOG and CD Projekt and indies cutting DRM and just being lauded for it. And I think EA is starting to kind of get the picture. So I wouldn't say that, like, I don't think anybody has to necessarily panic and start to worry that EA is about to ruin games. you know?
Yeah.
I mean, any more than they already might have been doing.
Yeah.
So.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, you know, thinking of this from a consumer's perspective, getting back to the idea of physical games versus digital games, I used to think that I wanted all games to be digital right away, like with this new batch of consoles, but after seeing this complete hubris of the size of these games that are coming out, right? Like, Killzone is like 40 gigabytes, and I think a lot of the next-gen titles are that large. I can't afford the hard drive space to have all my games be digital, and so I think from a consumer's perspective, there's still a value in having games on your bookshelf, that's where they are. They're not being eaten up in my hard drive on this new console, and so that's part of the reason why I wouldn't want everything to go all digital.
I think there's... Yeah. Oh, go ahead. I think there's another element to this. You know, every time the video gaming industry talks about the all-digital future, this isn't the first time that they've made comparisons to the record industry, but there's something there really... I don't want to accuse all of these people, and it's not just EA, of being disingenuous, but there is not really a one-to-one comparison between the way people consume music and the way people play video games. Like you just pointed out, the file size of a video game, they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but there's something else too, the portability of music. You buy your MP3, and yeah, it's a lot easier. I mean, I have, and I all paid for, by the way, I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of music in digital storage. I still move them over to my iPod, or on my phone, or I'll burn CDs if I'm talking to someone who's a time traveler from 10 years ago, or whatever. I can take my music wherever I want. I can listen to it wherever I want. I can edit and do like mixes for people however I want. And those are things that aren't really possible with video games. And not only that, the time suck required for you to like really deal with the video game is much greater. You can like listen to music while you're doing other things, but you can't really play a video game while you're doing other things. And so the way people are approaching it is going to be completely different. And there's something else though. I'm kind of like segueing, but I think the thing that might actually indicate some kind of sea change in the way the industry is thinking, or at least EA, is this quote. He says, quote, "The biggest impediment still appears to be bandwidth coming into the house." Mm-hmm. And while bandwidth, and I think this next part is a bit disingenuous, but has a kernel of truth. He says, "And while bandwidth speeds have improved dramatically over the last 5 years, unfortunately, because the processing power of the new boxes is so high, the size of the games has increased dramatically, and so all the benefits we got from faster bandwidth was probably eaten up by bigger games." And some of that is a little disingenuous, but it's not just about the bigger games, which we already talked about. It's the fact that, like, the infrastructure just isn't there. Most Americans do not have internet that could possibly justify, downloading anything bigger than an MP3 or streaming a movie,
Sure. Have you guys tried downloading a full-size game from PlayStation 4 yet?
Yeah,
or
I have.
How long did it take?
Wait, hang on. You have crazy internet. That's not
I have crazy internet, and I pay a lot for it. So that is relevant. But I downloaded all of Assassin's Creed 4 to PS4 in like 15 minutes or something. So
How many gigs was that?
Like 25, I think.
Oh my god.
Okay, just point of comparison, I downloaded all of Assassin's Creed 4 overnight on my PC last night, and it took literally all night. So,
point of comparison, I downloaded. Oh wait, I can't say that. I downloaded a thing that I'm going to play. That was
NDA.
20 something. It was in the mid-20s, and it took about an hour and a half. So,
point of comparison, Skyrim is 7 gigs.
Yeah, well, one thing I want to point out before we get off of this is, I think that what we're seeing here is one of the ramifications from the Xbox moving onto a Blu-ray drive. If you go back and you look at games that were exclusive to the PS4, a lot of them were really big. Mm-hmm. But the games that were cross-platform were all really small because nobody, with the exception of maybe Mass Effect, wanted to have a game that was a couple discs.
Yeah.
And now you've got both consoles are on Blu-ray, so there's no more, God, we got to figure out how to fit this on a DVD.
It also, too, like, there's something else to it, right? Like, Microsoft and Sony, and probably to a degree the big game publishers, still have an active interest in retail space, don't they?
Oh, yeah.
How else are Microsoft and Sony going to ship their consoles? They need people to walk into Kmart and see a big, beautiful display that Kmart has built for them because they know that they'll get lots of foot traffic in this holiday. And so there's that sort of push and pull between those players that they are still dependent on, and I bet it filters down to the publishers where they want people to buy the PS4 so they can buy their games. And so
or accessories or whatever.
Yeah, and so they're all kind of tangled up in it. The digital future is further off than we thought, probably.
Yeah. Well, this is making me wool gather a bit, but going back to the comparison between music and a video game, one thing I find pretty interesting is how the video game industry was pretty good about embracing the digital space pretty quickly, whereas the music industry did everything they could to suppress it in every possible way, means both legal and in some cases pretty illegal. And the result was that they killed their own industry. One of the things that's really caused the music industry to suffer is by the time they finally got on board with MP3s, for instance, too much damage had already been done because people already had this idea in their head that they were paying way too much for those CDs anyway. I mean, you guys recall before about 2004, the average cost of a CD was $18, which is ridiculous, right? Video games, people have noticed that the price of a video game hasn't really gone up that much in the last 10 years. And video games, meanwhile, have done what you're supposed to do with the digital space, which is try to make it as easy as possible, convenient, all that kind of stuff. And I wonder if there's a relationship to, like, embracing it early, making it convenient, made the, like, urgency of, like, abandoning physical media much less urgent than it did perhaps for the music industry.
Sure. And, yeah, you can walk around with a little iPod with your entire music collection on it. And you just, like you said, we just don't have that same portability with gaming. It's actually the opposite. It's getting further from portability as games start to become 40 gigabytes. So
except if depending on how good this streaming with the Vita works, I'm super excited about that.
I mean,
That's all.
I was going to say the Vita, the 3DS, those handhelds, and then to a lesser extent, smartphones and tablets. That's the portability of gaming, and it's not the same experience that you look for in a PS4 or an Xbox One or
PC.
Or the transcendent gaming experience of all time, the personal computer.
You guys forgot NVIDIA Shield? That's also in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also didn't mention, several other things that are probably not going to sell.
All right, let's move on to talk about XCOM.
Well, I have one comment about EA real quick.
Sure.
I do feel like they're on a bit of a positive trajectory at this point, looking at a couple things. One is the cancellation of the free-to-play Command & Conquer. Because, right, it's like, it sucks that everybody at Victory Games got laid off, but, at the same time, it was clear nobody wanted that game. Nobody wanted to be microtransactioned in a Command & Conquer game, and so they were like, okay, we'll just not do that then. Which is crazy that EA would just bite that bullet and just, and they are still they're gonna turn that into some other Command & Conquer game, but, that I think is a good thing. And then you have NBA Live, which they held off for 4 years, and it's still not very good, but even now that they released it, but the fact is they still, they gave it 4 years to sort of, while they were because it was so bad, they realized it was bad, and I still can't believe they held off for so long.
Yeah. This brings us back to something that we talked about a couple of podcasts ago. It would be the most exquisite thing in the world if we could finally get some transparency in the actual data that these businesses have, to find out what is influencing those. We all assume that a couple of EA games, particularly Mass Effect 3 and SimCity, probably experienced steep drop-offs after maybe strong sales at launch, but we'll never know. And certainly stuff like that has to have influenced their decision to kill games with similar practices going in.
Right. And then the third thing is Dragon Age 3, which the fact that they're just letting it percolate right now instead of because everybody thought that was going to come out this fall, and now it's coming out next fall. Yeah. And so the fact that they're actually giving it a legitimate amount of time instead of rushing it out like Dragon Age 2 or Mass Effect 3 is a hugely positive sign for me. So
yeah, that's true.
And it's not a free-to-play, always online shooter.
Right.
although I will say that the leaked gameplay I saw the other day was kind of worrisome.
Here's the thing.
It's a year
that's
out,
why
Ron.
leaks. Yeah, that's why leaks suck. That EA hates that leaked, and that's why.
They should hate it. Yeah.
It looked so pre-alpha,
Yeah,
what is pre-alpha?
I'm conspiratorial enough to think that leaks like that happen deliberately from time to time because it's a way to do free market research.
Just focus.
Yeah, who's to say that the reaction to that leak isn't going to have a positive effect on the ultimate release version of the game?
Yeah. Yep.
Probably will regardless. Even if they did do it by accident.
Whether it was intentional or not.
Yeah.
All right, hey, let's move on. So we're going to go away for a second. When we come back, we're going to talk about XCOM Enemy Within. Welcome back. Ron and Phil, and anyone else who's played it, are going to talk about XCOM Enemy Within. You guys enjoy it, don't you?
The whole short version of Enemy Within is this. If you liked Enemy Unknown, go ahead and get Enemy Within because it's more of the really good stuff that you liked in Enemy Unknown.
Yeah, it's
Is that fair?
Big thumbs up for this expansion. I mean, I super loved Enemy Within or Enemy Unknown to begin with, right? Great game. Played the hell out of it. I dumped 40 hours into that game in probably a week when I first got it. And then Enemy Within comes out and basically just bolsters so many things.
Yeah.
It just adds a bunch more missions. There's a whole bunch of new mechanics. to mess around with. A lot of really great missions in general. And
The thing
yeah,
I really
it's just
like-
back in good reason to come back, basically.
Yeah, the thing I really liked about it is that for all the stuff that it added, like, you know, it adds the picking up the meld and chasing down the exalt cells and, you know, all the new maps and missions, everything that it added, none of it was at the expense of it feeling like the same game we'd already played.
Right.
Yeah, there's more stuff and there's more things to do, but if you like that enemy unknown feeling, you still get that same kind of, I don't know, groove from the game.
It also bolsters, I think, the complexity a little bit, which is something that I know old school XCOM fans felt was a little bit lacking from Enemy Unknown. Like I was never into XCOM. I'm a new school PC gamer to begin with, so I had never played the old XCOM games, and I got into Enemy Unknown and found it really accessible while still being challenging, and I liked that a lot. And Enemy Within does a great job of building on top of that foundation without, like you said, without muddying it at all. Like the new mechanics are all parallel to the old stuff, not like in the way of them.
And the meld stuff is challenging, some of it. I mean, sometimes you'll be like pushing through a base and you'll be able to see that meld that you want to go grab it, but then when you grab it, it turns out the whole thing was an ambush.
Right.
There's like a million aliens standing around that want to shoot you in the face.
Yeah, so we should say the big thing that's sprinkled out throughout the game now is this stuff called meld, which you can find in just about every mission or most missions. And it's just little canisters. If you send a guy over to that canister and click it, then you steal this meld stuff, and then you can use that as a resource back at the base to do like genetic engineering on your soldiers and make them stronger, or you can make them into cyborgs, which is super cool. But you have to capture it in mission. You have to, and there's a timer on all of it. So
and I'll tell you right now that one of those missions, capturing meld, is what cost Field Captain Hornshaw his life.
But yeah,
So you have a soldier named Field Captain Hornshaw.
I used to.
Yeah.
It's just a name on a wall.
So
you
back
can customize all
up
the
a
names.
sec. Like for the guy who's listening who maybe hasn't even tried the first XCOM Enemy Unknown yet. Like, what's the big deal with it? Like, what do you do? Boo.
It's pretty simple. It's a strategy game. You build these squads of soldiers. You run out. You complete various missions that range from killing a bunch of aliens, rescuing people from getting killed by a bunch of aliens, and the whole time you're trying to keep all the different nations around the world happy, which is almost impossible.
Yeah, so it's all turn-based in mission, and every time you get a mission, say like, the aliens are attacking the world basically, and XCOM is an organization built on by a bunch of nations that work together, and you're centralized in one location. You have one squad of guys, and every time something happens, say like every time the aliens mount an assault on various cities and start abducting people, you have to pick where you send your guys, and you have different benefits. But so for every mission you take and complete successfully, you reduce like the panic in that country. But for every mission you ignore, the panic rises, and the longer a nation is panicked, the more likely it is to drop out, and then you get less funding, which means you can't build up your base as much or buy as many resources. It affects your ability to do research to make new weapons because you're trying to steal the alien technology and fight back with it. It has huge repercussions. So every decision you make is about basically mitigating the slow collapse of your organization because it's basically what it feels like the whole time, is that you're juggling a lot of you're spinning a lot of plates, and they keep breaking, and you're just hoping to hold on for as long as you can until you get to the end of the game. So, and then you're also doing things like capturing aliens and stuff.
Why do you fall in love with your soldiers? That's something everyone talks about.
Oh man! So every mission, especially if you play on Iron Man mode where you can't save scum, every mission, you have your guys. You eventually build up to a squad of 6 dudes, and they rank up over time. So they get new abilities. So mid game, you've got a squad of vets who are like your go-to guys. You've got the sniper who's fucking, one shot, one kill dude, and you've got your heavy who runs in there and blasts everybody with explosives, and you come to rely on these folks, and if you lose one, especially because the resources are so limited, you have a very finite amount of money, and when you spend it on, say, building a new weapon for your interceptor planes so they can shoot down UFOs, that's something you couldn't spend on new soldier training. Or
new armor.
Or new armor, exactly. So you're making all those decisions all the time. So when you lose a vet and you have to bring in a rookie guy to take his place, that hurts.
One thing I didn't mention is each soldier has like a progression tree that you can customize them as they go down. So the sniper, one of the abilities that makes him really good is called Squad Sight, where he can shoot at anybody that anyone in your squad can see, whether he can see him or not.
Right.
So, by the time you've ranked these people up to lieutenant or captain or something, you've invested all these missions that they've done in them. Yeah. And by taking, say, Captain Hornshaw on one mission, you have to leave, Sergeant Lincoln behind. so he doesn't gain the experience for those missions because he's not on them. So if you end up with a squad of guys that are all colonel, which is the highest rank you can attain, and then you lose a couple, or God forbid you lose an entire squad,
got it.
It's
like
game over.
You would go to their funeral where they have an American flag over their coffin.
Oh, certainly.
You'd be saluting hard.
Yeah.
There's
the game is. Go ahead, Ron.
So there's actually a wall of remembrance inside your base where you can go, and it plays the funereal music in the background, and it has a wall of all your soldiers that have died and what rank they were and how many missions they had.
Well, and the brilliant part of the game is that it's such that if you make a bad decision, or if if something if a certain dice roll doesn't go your way, or you didn't prepare hard enough before a mission, things can go belly up real fast. And so you rely on these guys because they're so good, but at the same time, how vulnerable they are, and you'll play missions where you're very careful to kind of protect them all. And the great thing about Enemy Within is that it adds so many cool new missions that challenge you in different ways and make all your guys feel.
I don't think there's ever a point in that game where, no matter how powerful or how well equipped or how high a rank your guys get, there's never a point where it becomes, this is just a cakewalk. It's always hard. It's always challenging. And it's always nerve-wracking to send your guys into one of those situations. So if you haven't played it, you should definitely go play it.
Yeah. And Enemy Within does a great job of, parallel to you getting all these cool new abilities, bringing new abilities and new aliens to bear on battles. So you're still really challenged. I played this really great mission that I want to try and make a video of it, where you go on this fight in this fishing village in Canada, and turns out the whole village has been just ravaged by one of the worst enemy types in the game, which are called the chrysalids, and they actually will kill people, and the people they kill turn into the zombies, and then the zombies stumble around for a bit, and then they explode, and another chrysalid comes out. And they're really fast, and they're really hard to kill. And this whole mission is just all chrysalids, wall to wall. And you get in there, and you're it's Band of Brothers so hard, as they're fighting their way out of this, wrecked tanker ship. And chrysalids are all over the place. I lost a whole squad there, but it was seriously one of the best game stories I've ever experienced, emergently. It was super great.
That's awesome. Good stuff. All right, so we're going to move on to the final topic in a second when we come back and talk about Fallout 4 wide-eyed speculation. Welcome back. Now we're going to talk about Fallout 4. Ron was saying that he thinks he maybe knows, or it's...
No, nobody knows.
No.
But, there was a lot of speculation earlier this week back on Monday that there was this website called the Survivor2299.com, and it was playing a countdown clock. It was 26 days on Monday, and a Morse code message that was playing on a loop. So if you decoded the Morse code message, it came out to 11/12/13, which everybody said, well, that doesn't make sense because that was a week ago. But if you think about it in military terminology, it comes out to December 11. And that's the date that the countdown clock will hit 0, is December 11th.
Gotcha.
There's a ton of speculation. You know, so a lot of people did a lot, as is usual, when something like this happens, the detective squads of the internet kicked into action. It turns out that site is actually registered to ZeniMax Media.
Uh-oh.
However, of course, it's possible to fake that. So, I mean, there are also some images hidden in the page code that are hosted by a site called prepareforthefuture.com. Those of you that were around 5 years ago will remember that that's the site that Bethesda used in the run-up to the launch of Fallout 3.
Yeah.
And then, finally, if you go to a Who Is on that site, the administrative organization of that site is also ZeniMax Media. And some people have pointed out, hey, it's registered with GoDaddy, and ZeniMax doesn't register with GoDaddy. They use corporate domains. But then you go look at what Blizzard did with Warlords of Draenor, and they registered it with GoDaddy and then transferred it to their normal partner after they announced the game.
Gotcha.
So obviously, normally Bethesda said, we don't comment on rumors or speculation. So, it's up to you guys. You think what you want to think. You believe what you want to believe. There's a really good story that Mike Sharkey did on the site about it. It has a ton of links to the big mega thread that Reddit's working on and all the sites that are involved in it. So
it's been long enough, right, for there to be a new Fallout.
We've had 2 Elder Scrolls games in that time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my question to you guys is:
You're a cat.
Sorry.
I don't know how. My cat literally opened the door. I don't know how.
I'm pretty sure that hearing a cat in the GameFront podcast means Half-Life 3 is confirmed.
Yeah.
So we got that going for us.
It's the ARG is what you can hear in the background of this podcast.
But it's just long enough to where I really miss Fallout now, and I'm ready for that universe to come back. I was just looking up, I was trying to remember what ending I got in Fallout 3, and whenever I told people that I lived at the end, they were like, how? Doesn't the guy die? I did the most cowardly choice. I let Sarah Lyons, the girl, go into the irradiated chamber for me.
Right.
Because I was like, screw that, I'm not doing that. And you live at the end.
Well, they also patched that ending, though, because originally you'd get to the end and it would basically be like, here's my friend who's immune to radiation. And he's like, nope, it's you that has to do this. Be brave, sir.
So
what
dumb.
the hell?
Yeah, you have a mutant friend who could easily walk in there and do it, no problem, but he won't. They send you instead, and it's like, ugh.
Yeah, after the DLC came out, they patched it.
Yeah, so
it was stupid.
Now it's like you can either send him in or you go in yourself, and then you wake up in the hospital, and they're like, space magic saved you. But yeah, I actually used that as as a rebuttal when Phil and I were working on that Mass Effect opus, because they did a dramatic change to the ending, and it's precisely because everyone hated it so much. Yay for them! One more reason I'm looking forward to the return to Fallout.
I will point out that there was a poster on Reddit back in August of 2012 that said that he, quote unquote, may or may not be an MIT employee, but that he had seen Bethesda
around campus
researching Boston, blah, blah, blah. And then supposedly that was going to be where Fallout 4 takes place in Boston, and it was tied into the Institute.
No, there's that section called the Commonwealth in the world of Fallout.
Yep.
It's like all of New England, basically.
And the Institute is supposed to be MIT.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, there's absolutely no way that we can say in any way, shape, or form that, yes, there is Fallout 4, although I'm pretty sure there will be, at some point, a Fallout 4. But this may not be it. However, it's also important to note what else is going on December the 11th. which unless I'm mistaken, that would be the Goofy Spike Video Game Awards.
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
So either they're going to announce it at the VGAs, which would be typical,
It's BGX.
or
BGX,
this is.
Ross.
I'm
No,
sorry.
no.
I apologize for insulting.
Conform
you.
to marketing, Ross.
I take it back. The VGAs are on December 7th, so all that's out the window.
You mean the VGX? But the VGX is on the.
So, check out the article. Let us know what you think, because we really don't know. That to be true.
I'm just gonna say it is. I don't know.
I want it to be. I mean, come on.
Well, I hope it's just not developed by Bethesda. I hope somebody else does it.
Why? What do you mean?
Because I love New Vegas, and
Yeah.
I think New Vegas makes Fallout 3 look like I don't know, like Fallout
2.
Tactics. Like,
I
yeah,
love Vegas.
Yeah.
I love New Vegas too. Phil, look, Owen, you and I know about Obsidian. Okay, we know.
Yep.
You and I are the only two people on the planet that still think Alpha Protocol was a good game.
Yes, the best game. Best game.
So
The game of the generation, right there.
well, that might be a little strong, but
Sweet. Ron, why don't you close us out? I think we're all done.
all right. Everybody, thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to head over to Twitter, follow us at GameFront.com, or head over to YouTube and check out Mitch and James' stuff at youtube.com/GameFront. You can, of course, subscribe to the podcast on iTunes by clicking the link that's right down there, or you can send us an email if you have something that you want to tell us about, you want to hear us talk about, or if you just want to make snide comments about why we let Owen on the show. Podcast@GameFront.com. Thanks for listening, and have a great weekend.
Be sure to say bye to Mark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good work,
Bye, guys.
Mark.
I'm standing here in a robe, glowing green.
He's a